The gavel came down with a sound that echoed through the courthouse like thunder. I sat there, 18 years old, staring at the judge as she spoke words that would change everything. The property was mine, all of it. The ranch, the land, the legacy of a man I had never met but who had somehow seen something in me worth saving. Wayne Morales, the lawyer who had found me 3 months ago in that group home, squeezed my shoulder. His weathered hand felt steady against the trembling that had started in my chest and worked its way through my entire body. The opposing counsel, representing some distant relatives who had crawled out of the woodwork the moment they heard about the inheritance, gathered their papers in defeat. They had tried to prove I was not worthy, that some mistake had been made. But the will was ironclad, and the DNA test had confirmed what felt impossible. Ronald Lopez, a man I had never known existed, had left me everything. The courtroom began to empty, but I remained frozen in my seat. Wayne leaned down and whispered that we could go now, that it was over, that I had won. But winning felt like such a strange word for this moment. How do you win something you never knew you were fighting for? How do you inherit a life from someone who never tried to find you while he was living it? The questions had been eating at me since that day Wayne first showed up at Riverside Group Home, carrying a manila envelope that contained the most shocking news of my life. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you are watching from and hype this video in the comments. This story gets even more incredible, and I want to know if any of you have ever felt like you did not belong anywhere, because that feeling is about to change everything. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment that started it all. I was 17, just 2 months away from aging out of the system, when Wayne Morales walked into the common room at Riverside. I had been living there for 8 months, my longest placement in years. Most kids bounced around between foster homes and group facilities, but I had developed a reputation for being difficult. Not because I caused trouble, but because I asked too many questions and never seemed to settle into the role everyone expected me to play. The grateful orphan, the kid who should just be thankful for whatever scraps of affection came my way. Helen Kim, the facility director, called me into her office that Tuesday afternoon in March. She had this look on her face that I had learned to read over the years. It was the look adults got when they were about to deliver news that would uproot my life again. I prepared myself for another transfer, another fresh start in a new place where I would have to learn new rules and navigate new personalities. But Wayne Morales was not what I expected. He was probably in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple gray suit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades helping people through the most difficult moments of their lives. When Helen introduced him as a lawyer from Millfield County, 3 hours north, my first thought was that I had somehow gotten into legal trouble without realizing it. But Wayne smiled and asked if we could speak privately. Helen left us alone in her office, and Wayne pulled out that manila envelope. He set it on the desk between us and folded his hands. "Peter Williams," he said, using my full name in a way that made it sound important rather than accusatory. "I need to tell you about your grandfather." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had never known any of my grandparents. My mother had died when I was 3, and I had no memory of her or any family she might have had. My father was listed as unknown on my birth certificate. For 14 years, I had existed in a world where I seemed to have materialized from nothing, with no roots, no connections, no history that extended beyond the day I entered the system. Wayne opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. It showed an older man standing beside a wooden fence, with rolling hills and a red barn visible in the background. He had my eyes, the same dark brown that I saw in the mirror every morning, the same stubborn jawline that had gotten me labeled as defiant by more than one caseworker. "Ronald Lopez," Wayne said. "He passed away 6 weeks ago, and he left instructions for me to find you." The story Wayne told me that afternoon felt like something from a movie rather than real life. Ronald had been my mother's father, but they had a falling out when she was young. Pride and stubbornness on both sides had kept them apart for years. When my mother died, Ronald had tried to find me, but the system had already closed ranks around me. Back then, there were fewer digital records, less transparency. A grieving grandfather with no legal standing had little chance of navigating the bureaucracy that protected children like me. But Ronald never stopped looking. He hired private investigators, worked with lawyers, followed every lead that might bring him closer to his only grandchild. It took him 14 years to find me, and by then I was almost grown. He spent the last year of his life watching me from a distance, learning about the young man I had become. Wayne showed me school records that someone had obtained, reports from social workers, even photographs that had been taken without my knowledge during some of my placements. It should have felt invasive, but instead it felt like proof that someone had cared enough to try. Someone had wanted me, had been searching for me, had seen value in a connection I never knew existed. Ronald had been sick for the past 2 years, fighting cancer that eventually won, but he had used his remaining time to create a plan that would give me everything he had never been able to provide while I was growing up. The ranch was 1,200 acres of prime farmland in Millfield County. There was a main house that had been in the Lopez family for 3 generations, several outbuildings, livestock, and equipment worth more than I could comprehend. But more than the material wealth, there were letters, dozens of them, written over the course of that final year, meant to help me understand who I was and where I came from. Wayne explained that there would be challenges. Some distant relatives had already begun questioning the will, arguing that I was too young and inexperienced to handle such responsibility. There would be legal fees, property taxes, and the enormous task of learning how to manage a working ranch. But Ronald had also set up a trust fund to cover expenses for the first few years, and he had arranged for local people to help me learn what I needed to know. I sat in that office for 2 hours, listening to Wayne describe a life that felt completely foreign and utterly impossible. A grandfather who had loved me from a distance, a home that was waiting for me, a future that stretched beyond aging out of the system and hoping for the best. When Wayne finally finished talking, he asked if I had any questions. I had 1,000 questions, but only one seemed important in that moment. Why now? Why had Ronald waited until he was dying to reach out? Why had he not tried to bring me home while there was still time for us to know each other? Wayne was quiet for a long moment before he answered. He said that Ronald had been afraid. Afraid that I would reject him the way his daughter had. Afraid that the system would fight him and I would get lost in the legal battles. Afraid that he was too old and set in his ways to raise a child who had already been through so much trauma. But mostly he was afraid that he did not deserve a second chance after failing his own daughter so completely. The regret had eaten at him, Wayne explained. Every year that passed made it harder to reach out, harder to believe that I would want anything to do with a grandfather who had been absent for my entire childhood. So he had chosen to love me from a distance, to learn about me without disrupting the life I was building, and to leave me something that might make up for all the years we had lost. It was not a perfect solution, Wayne admitted. It was the choice of a proud, stubborn man who had learned too late that love requires vulnerability. But it was also the choice of someone who wanted to give me every opportunity he could, even if it meant never getting to see how I used those opportunities. Helen Kim returned to the office as Wayne was packing up his papers. She had been listening from the hallway, he could tell, because her eyes were red and she was trying not to cry. She had worked with hundreds of kids over the years. But she said later that she had never seen anything like this. A family member who had been searching for 14 years. An inheritance that could change everything. A chance for one of her kids to have the kind of future that most of them could only dream about. But she also knew me well enough to understand that this news would be overwhelming. I had spent my entire life believing that I was alone in the world, that no one had ever wanted me enough to fight it for me. Learning that someone had been searching, had been caring, had been planning for my future, challenged everything I thought I knew about myself and my place in the world. Wayne left his business card and told me to call him when I was ready to talk more. He said there was no rush, that the property would wait for me as long as I needed. But he also warned me that the distant relatives were already making noise about contesting the will. If I wanted to claim my inheritance, we would need to move forward soon. That night, I lay in my narrow bed in the dormitory-style room I shared with 3 other boys, staring at the ceiling and trying to process what had happened. Justin Evans, my roommate, asked if I was okay. He had seen Wayne leave and noticed that I had been quiet during dinner. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words felt too big, too impossible to explain. How do you tell someone that your entire life just changed in the space of a single conversation? Instead, I pulled out the photograph Wayne had left with me. In the dim light from the hallway, I studied Ronald Lopez's face, looking for signs of the connection that apparently existed between us. The resemblance was undeniable, but it felt like looking at a stranger who happened to share my features. This man had been my grandfather for 17 years, but I had no memories of him, no shared experience, no relationship beyond the genetic material we had in common. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Wayne had been right about the distant relatives. Two of Ronald's nephews, Ethan Hernandez and Peter Williams, had hired their own lawyer and were preparing to challenge the will. They argued that Ronald had been mentally incompetent when he wrote it, that I was not really his grandson, and that the estate should pass to them as the next closest living relatives. Helen Kim helped me understand the legal process and connected me with resources at the county courthouse. The DNA test was scheduled for the following week, and Wayne assured me that the results would put any questions about my parentage to rest. But the waiting was torture. Every day that passed was another day for doubt to creep in, another opportunity for me to wonder if this was all some elaborate mistake. The group home felt different now that I knew it might not be my permanent reality. The rules that had always seemed arbitrary now felt temporary. The other kids, who had been my closest thing to family for the past 8 months, suddenly felt like people I was preparing to leave behind. I found myself pulling away from friendships that had taken months to build, protecting myself from the guilt of abandoning them for a better life. Lisa Chavez, one of the social workers, noticed the change in my behavior and asked to speak with me privately. She was young, probably only a few years older than me, and she had always been more like a big sister than an authority figure. She knew about the inheritance, had read the reports, and talked to Wayne Morales about the legal proceedings. Lisa told me that it was normal to feel conflicted about leaving. She said that survivor guilt was common among kids who aged out successfully or found permanent placements after years in the system. The knowledge that you were escaping a situation that others remained trapped in could be overwhelming, especially when the escape felt unearned. But she also reminded me that I had not asked for any of this. I had not manipulated the system or taken advantage of anyone. A family member I had never known had chosen to give me opportunities that he hoped would make up for years of absence. I could honor that gift by accepting it gracefully and using it well, or I could reject it out of misplaced guilt and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. The DNA test results came back positive, confirming what the physical resemblance had already suggested. Ronald Lopez was indeed my grandfather, which made me his legal heir, regardless of what his nephews thought about it. Wayne called with the news on a Friday afternoon, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He had been confident all along, but having scientific proof made our legal position unassailable. The court date was scheduled for 6 weeks later, which gave us time to prepare our case and gather additional documentation. Wayne explained that the nephews were likely to argue that I was too young and inexperienced to manage such a large estate, that the property would be better served by someone with agricultural experience and business knowledge. It was not enough to prove that I was Ronald's grandson. We also had to prove that I was capable of honoring his intentions. This meant learning everything I could about farming, ranch management, and rural life in general. Wayne arranged for me to spend weekends at the property, working with Helen Rodriguez, the woman who had been managing the ranch since Ronald became too sick to handle the daily operations. She was in her 50s, with calloused hands and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of the best group home staff I had encountered over the years. Helen Rodriguez did not care about my lack of experience or my background in the foster system. She cared about whether I was willing to work hard and learn quickly. The first weekend I spent at the ranch, she had me mucking out stalls, repairing fences, and learning to operate equipment that I had only seen in movies. My hands were blistered and my back ached, but I felt more useful than I had in years. The main house was exactly what I had imagined a family home should look like. It was 2 stories with a wraparound porch and windows that let in enormous amounts of natural light. The kitchen was the heart of the house, with a large table that could seat 8 people and cabinets that were filled with mismatched dishes that told the story of decades of family meals. Ronald's bedroom was on the first floor, and Wayne had left it exactly as it had been when he died. On the nightstand beside the bed was a stack of letters addressed to me. Wayne had mentioned them, but seeing my name written in Ronald's careful handwriting made everything feel real in a way that legal documents and DNA tests could not. These were the words my grandfather had wanted me to hear, the explanations and apologies and hopes that he had been too afraid to share while he was alive. I spent that first night at the ranch reading through the letters, learning about the man who had given me everything and the woman who had been my mother. Ronald wrote about Maria Lopez with a mixture of love and regret that made my chest ache. She had been strong-willed and independent, determined to make her own way in the world without relying on her father's support. When she became pregnant at 19, Ronald had reacted with anger and disappointment instead of understanding and compassion. The fight that followed had been devastating for both of them. Maria left home and cut off all contact, determined to prove that she could raise her child without help from a father who disapproved of her choices. Ronald, too proud to apologize and too hurt to keep trying, had let her go. By the time he realized his mistake and tried to reach out, Maria had already died and I had disappeared into the foster system. The letters were full of details about my mother that no one had ever shared with me. Her love of horses and her talent for training them. Her fierce loyalty to the people she cared about, and her complete inability to back down from a fight. Her plans to become a veterinarian, and her dreams of running a rescue operation for abandoned animals. She sounded like someone I would have been proud to know, someone whose strength and determination had been passed down to me through genetics and example. Ronald also wrote about his hopes for me and the ranch. He wanted me to continue the work that had been his family's legacy for 3 generations, but he also wanted me to make it my own. He had left detailed instructions for managing the livestock and maintaining the equipment, but he had also encouraged me to pursue my own interests and find my own path forward. The trust fund he had established would cover my living expenses and college tuition if I chose to pursue higher education. The ranch was profitable enough to support itself, but it would require careful management and hard work. He had arranged for Helen Rodriguez to stay on as long as I needed her guidance, and he had spoken with several neighbors who had promised to help me learn the skills I would need. But more than the practical considerations, Ronald had tried to give me something I had never had before, a sense of belonging, a place where I was not a temporary resident or a burden to be managed, but a member of a family with deep roots and a long history. The ranch was not just property, it was home in a way that I was only beginning to understand. The weeks leading up to the court date were a whirlwind of preparation and learning. I split my time between the group home and the ranch, trying to absorb as much knowledge as possible while also completing my high school requirements. Helen Kim had been incredibly supportive, allowing me flexibility in my schedule and even arranging for independent study options that would let me graduate on time despite the disruption. Helen Rodriguez became my most important teacher during this period. She had worked for Ronald for over 20 years and knew every inch of the property. She taught me how to read the signs that indicated when cattle needed to be moved to different pastures, how to maintain the equipment that kept the ranch running, and how to balance the books that tracked expenses and income. But she also taught me about the community I would be joining if I won the legal battle. Millfield County was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where reputation mattered more than money, and where outsiders were viewed with suspicion until they proved themselves worthy of trust. As Ronald's grandson, I would have a certain amount of automatic acceptance, but I would still need to earn my place through my actions and character. The neighboring ranchers had all known my mother when she was young. Laura Rodriguez, Helen's sister-in-law, ran the feed store in town and had been one of Maria's closest friends in high school. She told me stories about my mother's rebellious streak and her talent for getting into trouble, but also about her kindness and her fierce protection of anyone she considered family. Betty Cruz, who owned the diner on Main Street, remembered my mother as a teenager who would spend her allowance buying meals for classmates who could not afford lunch. She had been planning to study veterinary medicine at the state university when she became pregnant with me. The scholarship she had earned would have covered most of her expenses, but she had given up that dream to focus on preparing for motherhood. These stories painted a picture of my mother that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She had made sacrifices for me before I was even born, had fought to give me opportunities even when it meant giving up her own. The fact that she had died so young, before we could build any memories together, felt like a tragedy that had shaped my entire life without me even realizing it. But it also helped me understand why Ronald had been so determined to find me and provide for my future. He was trying to honor his daughter's memory by giving me the opportunities she had wanted me to have. The ranch was not just an inheritance, it was an apology, a way of making amends for the support he had failed to provide when Maria needed it most. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early May. Wayne had prepared me for what to expect, but walking into that courthouse still felt overwhelming. The building was old and imposing, with high ceilings and wooden benches that had been worn smooth by decades of people seeking justice. The nephews who were contesting the will, Ethan Hernandez and Peter Williams, sat with their lawyer on one side of the courtroom, while Wayne and I took our places on the other. Judge Helen Kim, who shared a name with my group home director but no other similarities, presided over the hearing with stern efficiency. She had reviewed all the documents in advance and seemed impatient with the nephew's arguments. Their lawyer tried to paint me as an opportunistic stranger who was taking advantage of a sick old man's guilt. But the evidence told a different story. Wayne presented the DNA test results. The private investigator reports that documented Ronald's years-long search for me, and testimony from Helen Rodriguez about my willingness to learn and work hard. He also read portions of Ronald's letters, the ones where my grandfather explained his motivations and his hopes for my future. The nephew's lawyer argued that I lacked the experience and knowledge necessary to manage such a large operation, that the property would be better served by someone with agricultural background. But when Judge Kim asked if either Ethan or Peter had any farming experience themselves, their lawyer had to admit that they were both city dwellers with office jobs who had never shown any interest in the ranch while Ronald was alive. The hearing lasted most of the morning, but the outcome felt inevitable from the beginning. Judge Kim ruled that the will was valid, that I was indeed Ronald's grandson and rightful heir, and that there was no evidence of mental incompetence or undue influence. The property was mine, along with all the responsibilities and opportunities that came with it. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping into a completely different life. Wayne shook my hand and congratulated me, but his expression was serious as he reminded me that winning the legal battle was just the beginning. Now I had to prove that I could handle the responsibilities I had inherited, that I could honor Ronald's legacy while building my own future. The drive from the courthouse to the ranch took about an hour, winding through rolling hills and farmland that stretched to the horizon. It was late spring and everything was green and alive in a way that felt almost overwhelming after years of institutional buildings and urban landscapes. This was going to be my view every morning, my responsibility every day, my home for as long as I chose to stay. Helen Rodriguez was waiting for me when I arrived, along with several neighbors who had come to welcome me officially to the community. There was a small celebration on the front porch with homemade food and congratulations from people who had known my grandfather and mother. It felt like the closest thing to a family gathering I had ever experienced. But even in the midst of the celebration, I could feel the weight of expectations settling on my shoulders. These people had respected Ronald Lopez and trusted his judgment. By accepting me as his heir, they were giving me the benefit of the doubt, but I would need to earn their continued support through my actions and decisions. The first few months were the hardest I had ever experienced, but also the most rewarding. Every day brought new challenges and new learning opportunities. I made mistakes that cost money and time, but I also began to develop the skills and confidence that would serve me for the rest of my life. Helen Rodriguez was patient with my inexperience, but demanding in her expectations, pushing me to work harder and think more carefully about every decision. The physical work was exhausting but satisfying in a way that nothing else had ever been. When I repaired a fence or treated a sick animal or brought in a successful harvest, I could see the immediate results of my efforts. There was no bureaucracy to navigate, no caseworker to convince, no system to manipulate, just honest work that produced tangible outcomes. But the emotional adjustment was even more significant than the practical learning. For the first time in my life, I was not a temporary resident somewhere. This was my home, my responsibility, my future. I could make long-term plans and investments without worrying about being transferred or aged out. I could build relationships with neighbors and community members without the fear that I would be forced to leave just as those connections were becoming meaningful. The loneliness that had been my constant companion for 17 years began to fade as I found my place in the rural community. People stopped by to check on me, to offer advice, to include me in local events and traditions. I was no longer Peter Williams, the foster kid with no family and no future. I was Peter Williams, Ronald Lopez's grandson, the young man who was carrying on a family legacy with determination and respect. 6 months after the court hearing, I received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 40s knocked on my door one evening, introducing herself as Lisa Chavez. She explained that she had been my mother's best friend in high school and had only recently learned about my existence and inheritance. She had been living in California for the past 20 years, but had returned to Millfield County to care for her aging parents. Lisa had brought with her a box of photographs and mementos from her friendship with my mother. Pictures of Maria as a teenager, laughing with friends at school events and county fairs. Letters she had written to Lisa after leaving home, describing her hopes and fears about becoming a young mother. A baby blanket she had knitted for me during her pregnancy, soft blue yarn worked into a pattern of stars and moons. Seeing these pieces of my mother's life was both wonderful and heartbreaking. She had been so young in the photographs, barely older than I was now, but her smile was radiant, and her eyes held the same stubborn determination that I recognized in myself. The letters revealed a young woman who was scared but excited about her future, who loved me before I was even born, who had plans and dreams that were cut short far too soon. Lisa told me stories about my mother that no one else could share. How she had talked about me constantly during her pregnancy, already planning my future and imagining the kind of person I would become. How she had been determined to be a better parent than she felt her own father had been, to give me the support and understanding that she had craved during her own childhood. How she had died believing that she was leaving me in capable hands, never knowing that those hands would fail to keep us together. The baby blanket became one of my most treasured possessions. I kept it folded in the top drawer of the dresser in my bedroom, taking it out sometimes when the weight of my responsibilities felt overwhelming. It was proof that I had been wanted, that someone had spent hours creating something beautiful just for me, that love had existed in my life even during the years when I felt completely alone. As autumn arrived, I faced my first major test as a ranch owner. The cattle needed to be moved to winter pastures, a complex operation that required careful planning and coordination with neighboring ranchers. Helen Rodriguez had explained the process to me multiple times, but actually executing it would be my responsibility. The work began before dawn on a crisp October morning. Several neighbors had volunteered to help, bringing their own horses and equipment to assist with the roundup. I felt nervous and underprepared, but everyone treated me with the same respect they would have shown Ronald, trusting that I would learn what I needed to know and make good decisions. The day was long and challenging, but it was also exhilarating. Working alongside experienced ranchers, learning to anticipate the movements of the cattle, feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. By evening, the herd had been successfully moved to their winter grazing area, and I had proven to myself and the community that I could handle the responsibilities I had inherited. That night, several of the neighbors stayed for dinner, sharing stories and advice around the kitchen table that had become the heart of my new life. Wayne Morales was there, along with Helen Rodriguez and Laura Rodriguez and Betty Cruz. The conversation ranged from practical matters like feed prices and weather forecasts to personal stories about Ronald and Maria and the history of the community. It struck me as I listened to their voices filling the house that this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not the biological connection I had never known, but the chosen family of people who cared about each other's welfare and success. People who showed up when help was needed, who celebrated achievements and supported each other through challenges. Winter brought a different rhythm to ranch life, with more time for planning and maintenance and less immediate urgency. I used the quieter months to read through Ronald's extensive library, learning about agricultural techniques and business management. I also began taking correspondence courses in ranch management and animal husbandry, building on the practical experience I was gaining with more formal education. The isolation that I had initially feared never materialized. The rural community was actually more connected than any place I had lived before. People checked on each other regularly, especially during harsh weather. There were community gatherings at the church and school, seasonal celebrations that brought everyone together, and informal networks of support that ensured no one faced difficulties alone. I also began to understand the deeper meaning of the legacy Ronald had left me. It was not just about the land or the livestock or the financial security. It was about being part of something larger than myself, contributing to a community that had existed for generations and would continue long after I was gone. The ranch was not just my home. It was my responsibility to the past and My contribution to the future. Spring brought new challenges and new opportunities. I had survived my first winter as a ranch owner and proven that I could handle the basic responsibilities of the operation. Now it was time to start thinking about improvements and expansions, ways to honor Ronald's legacy while making the ranch my own. I decided to pursue my mother's dream of working with animals in need. Using part of the trust fund Ronald had established, I began converting one of the unused outbuildings into a facility for rescuing and rehabilitating abandoned horses. It felt like a way to honor both my grandfather's generosity and my mother's compassion, while also contributing something meaningful to the community. The project required permits and inspections in coordination with veterinarians and animal welfare organizations. It was complex and sometimes frustrating, but it was also deeply satisfying to work toward a goal that felt personally meaningful. When the first rescued horse arrived, a mare who had been neglected and abandoned, I felt like I was finally living up to the potential that Ronald had seen in me. The rescue operation grew slowly but steadily over the following months. Word spread through the network of horse owners and veterinarians, and soon I was receiving calls about animals that needed help. Each rescue was different, requiring different approaches and treatments. But the satisfaction of nursing an animal back to health and finding it a loving home never diminished. Helen Rodriguez had been skeptical of the project at first, worried that it would distract me from the core ranch operations. But she became one of its strongest supporters as she saw how the rescue work was connecting me more deeply to the community and giving me a sense of purpose that went beyond simple property management. The rescue also brought me into contact with Justin Evans, a veterinarian who had recently returned to Millfield County after completing his residency at the State University. He was a few years older than me, with the kind of practical knowledge and gentle manner that made him perfect for working with traumatized animals. We developed a friendship based on our shared commitment to the rescue operation and our similar experiences of finding our place in a small rural community. Justin became my closest friend during that second year on the ranch. He understood the challenges of being young and trying to prove yourself in a community where reputation was everything. He had grown up in a neighboring county, but had spent enough time away to appreciate the unique qualities of rural life, the way that hard work and integrity mattered more than credentials or connections. Through Justin, I met other young people who were choosing to build their lives in Millfield County rather than leaving for bigger cities and different opportunities. There was a small but growing community of people our age who appreciated the quality of life and sense of connection that small-town living could provide. For the first time since leaving the group home, I had friends who shared my interests and understood my choices. The second anniversary of Ronald's death fell on a warm day in June. I had been living on the ranch for over a year, and the transformation in my life was almost impossible to believe. I had gone from being a foster kid with no prospects to being a successful ranch owner with deep community connections and a meaningful purpose. I spent that anniversary day working in the fields, doing the kind of physical labor that Ronald had done for most of his life. The work was hard and the sun was hot, but there was something deeply satisfying about continuing the traditions that had sustained the ranch for 3 generations. I thought about my grandfather as I worked, wondering what he would think of the changes I had made and the direction I was taking. That evening, I sat on the front porch with a glass of iced tea and one of Ronald's letters, reading his words as the sun set over the fields he had loved. He had written about his hopes that I would find happiness and purpose on the ranch, that I would build the kind of life that he and Marie had never been able to share. Looking around at everything I had accomplished and everyone who had become part of my life, I felt like those hopes were being fulfilled. The legal challenges from the nephews had ended with their defeat in court, but I occasionally heard updates about their lives through the community network. Ethan Hernandez had moved to another state, apparently bitter about losing his expected inheritance. Peter Williams had attempted to start his own agricultural business, but had failed within 6 months, lacking the knowledge and commitment that successful farming required. I felt no satisfaction in their failures, but I was grateful that the property had remained in hands that would care for it properly. The ranch was thriving under my management. The rescue operation was helping animals throughout the region, and the community had accepted me as a valued member rather than an outsider who had gotten lucky. As autumn approached again, I began planning for my 3rd year on the ranch. The operation was profitable and sustainable, the rescue was well established and respected, and I had developed the skills and knowledge necessary to handle whatever challenges might arise. But more importantly, I had found something that I had been searching for my entire life without even realizing it. I had found home, not just a place to live, but a sense of belonging that went deeper than legal documents or property ownership. I was part of a community that valued my contributions, part of a legacy that connected me to the past and the future, part of a family that I had chosen and that had chosen me in return. The group home felt like a different lifetime, even though it had been less than 2 years since I left. The fear and uncertainty that had defined my childhood had been replaced by confidence and purpose. The loneliness that had been my constant companion had been replaced by meaningful relationships and community connections. I still kept in touch with Helen Kim and some of the other kids from Riverside, sharing updates about my life and offering support when they needed it. Several of them had aged out of the system successfully, finding homes in apartments and beginning to build independent lives. But I knew how lucky I was, how rare it was for someone with my background to have the opportunities that Ronald's legacy had provided. That knowledge came with responsibility. I had been given a second chance that most foster kids never received, and I felt obligated to make the most of it. The ranch was not just my home. It was proof that people like me could succeed when given the right support and opportunities. It was a testament to the power of family, even family that came together through tragedy and loss rather than traditional bonds. The third year brought new challenges that tested everything I had learned about ranch management and community leadership. A severe drought threatened the entire region, forcing difficult decisions about water usage and livestock management. Many of the older ranchers looked to me for leadership, recognizing that my youth and energy could be valuable assets during the crisis. I worked with county officials and neighboring ranchers to develop conservation strategies that would help everyone survive the difficult conditions. The rescue operation had to be temporarily scaled back, but the relationships I had built through that work proved invaluable as the community pulled together to face the drought. The experience taught me that being part of a community meant more than just accepting help when I needed it. It meant being ready to provide leadership and support when others were struggling. The ranch that Ronald had left me was not just my inheritance. It was a resource that could benefit the entire region when managed thoughtfully and generously. By the end of that third year, the drought had broken and the community had emerged stronger and more connected than before. My role in the crisis response had earned me a level of respect and trust that would have taken decades to build under normal circumstances. I was no longer seen as Ronald's grandson who was trying to prove himself. I was Peter Williams, a rancher and community leader in my own right. The transformation was complete in ways that I could never have imagined when Wayne Morales first walked into that group home office. I had gone from being a kid with no family and no future to being a young man with deep roots and unlimited possibilities. The ranch had given me more than financial security. It had given me identity, purpose, and belonging. As I sit here now, 5 years after that first meeting with Wayne, I can barely remember what it felt like to believe that no one wanted me. The ranch is thriving, the rescue operation has helped hundreds of animals find new homes, and I have become the kind of person that Ronald and Maria would have been proud to call family. The letters from my grandfather still sit on my nightstand, but I read them less frequently now. Not because they are less important, but because I have internalized their lessons and made them part of who I am. I understand now that family is not just about blood relationships or legal documents. It is about the people who choose to love and support each other, who share responsibilities and celebrations, who build something together that is larger than what any individual could create alone. The community that welcomed me has become my family in the truest sense of the word. Helen Rodriguez is like a mother to me, Wayne Morales like a wise uncle, Justin Evans like the brother I never had. The neighbors who helped me move cattle that first autumn have become lifelong friends. The customers who bring their animals to the rescue have become part of an extended network of people who care about each other's welfare and success. But perhaps most importantly, I have learned that being wanted is not something that happens to you. It is something you create through your actions and choices, through the way you treat others and contribute to the world around you. Ronald wanted me because he saw potential in me, but I had to fulfill that potential through my own efforts and decisions. The ranch will always be Ronald's legacy, but it has also become my own creation. The improvements I have made, the relationships I have built, the rescue operation I have established, all of these things reflect my own values and vision for the future. I am not just preserving what my grandfather left me. I am building on it, expanding it, making it something that reflects both his dreams and my own. When I drive through town now, people wave and call out my name. When I walk into Betty Cruz's diner, she already knows my usual order and asks about the latest rescues. When I attend community meetings, my opinions are sought and valued. This is what it means to belong somewhere, to be part of something larger than yourself. The scared 17-year-old who sat in Helen Kim's office that day could never have imagined this life. But that boy's experiences of rejection and abandonment were not wasted. They taught me to value the connections I have now, to never take for granted the love and support that surrounds me. They made me determined to help other young people who are facing the same challenges I once faced. I have started a scholarship fund for foster kids who want to pursue agricultural education, using some of the profits from the ranch to give other young people the opportunities that Ronald's generosity gave me. It is a small way of paying forward the gift I received, of ensuring that other kids who feel unwanted and forgotten might have the chance to build the kind of life I have been able to create. The fund has already helped 3 young people attend college and return to rural communities as teachers, veterinarians, and agricultural specialists. Each of them carries forward the lesson that Ronald taught me, that family is not about perfection or traditional relationships, but about commitment and love, and the willingness to invest in each other's futures. Looking back now, I understand that Ronald's greatest gift was not the ranch or the money or even the family history he shared through his letters. His greatest gift was the belief that I was worth investing in, that I had value and potential that deserved to be nurtured and supported. That belief changed everything about how I saw myself and what I thought was possible for my future. But I also understand that I had to be willing to accept that gift and work to deserve it. The ranch could have been sold, the money could have been wasted, the opportunities could have been squandered. Ronald gave me the chance to succeed, but I had to choose to take advantage of that chance through hard work and determination and respect for what I had been given. The community that welcomed me could have remained suspicious and distant, treating me as an outsider who had gotten lucky rather than someone who belonged. But I had to prove myself worthy of their acceptance through my actions and character, through my willingness to contribute to the common good rather than just taking advantage of my good fortune. The loneliness and abandonment that defined my childhood could have left me bitter and isolated, unable to trust or connect with others. But I had to choose to be vulnerable, to open myself to the possibility of love and belonging, to risk being hurt again in order to experience the joy of genuine connection. None of it was automatic or guaranteed. Every relationship had to be built, every skill had to be learned, every challenge had to be faced with courage and persistence. The inheritance gave me opportunities, but I had to create the life I wanted from those opportunities. As I write this, I am 23 years old, married to a wonderful woman I met through the rescue operation, and expecting our first child. The cycle is beginning again, but this time with the knowledge and resources and community support that will give our child every advantage I never had. This baby will grow up knowing exactly where they belong, surrounded by people who love them unconditionally, with roots that go deep into soil that has been worked by their family for generations. The ranch house that once felt too big and empty for one lonely teenager now echoes with laughter and conversation and the sounds of a life fully lived. The kitchen table where I ate so many solitary meals now hosts dinner parties and community meetings and planning sessions for the rescue operation. The bedrooms that stood empty for so long are being prepared for the children who will carry this legacy into the future. But even as I celebrate how far I have come, I never forget where I started. The group home experiences, the foster placements that failed, the years of believing that I was unwanted and unworthy of love, all of these experiences shaped me in ways that continue to influence how I approach relationships and responsibilities. I am more grateful than most people for the simple pleasures of belonging somewhere. I appreciate the security of knowing that I will wake up in the same bed tomorrow and next month and next year. I value the relationships that have grown slowly and steadily over time, built on shared experiences and mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation. The rescue operation continues to grow and expand, helping not just horses but other large animals that need rehabilitation and new homes. We have built partnerships with veterinary schools and animal welfare organizations throughout the region, creating a network of support that extends far beyond Millfield County. But the most rewarding part of the work is still the individual animals, the ones who arrive broken and afraid and gradually learn to trust again. Each successful rescue feels like a small victory against abandonment and neglect, a proof that love and patience can heal even the deepest wounds. I see something of my own story in every animal we help. The fear in their eyes when they first arrive, the gradual relaxation as they realize they are safe, the transformation that happens when they understand that this place is different from wherever they came from. It is the same journey I made from the group home to the ranch, from isolation to belonging, from survival to thriving. The letters from Ronald have been joined by others over the years. Letters from young people who have received scholarships from the fund I established. Letters from families who have adopted animals from the rescue. Letters from community members who want to share their appreciation for the contributions the ranch has made to the region. Each letter is a reminder that the impact of Ronald's decision to find me and provide for my future extends far beyond my own life. The ranch has become a center of activity and support for the entire community, creating jobs and opportunities and hope for people who might otherwise have struggled to find their place in the changing rural economy. The nephews who contested the will have faded into memory, their legal challenge a minor footnote in a much larger story about the power of love and determination to overcome obstacles and create meaningful change. I occasionally wonder what might have happened if they had won, if the ranch had been broken up and sold to pay for their legal fees and personal expenses. But those thoughts are brief and quickly dismissed. What matters is not what might have been, but what actually happened. A lonely old man found the courage to reach out across years of separation and regret to give his grandson a chance at the kind of life he had always wanted to provide. A scared teenager found the strength to accept that gift and work to deserve it. A community found ways to welcome and support someone who had never experienced unconditional acceptance before. The story could have ended differently at so many points along the way. If Ronald had not persisted in his search for me, if Wayne had not been able to navigate the legal system successfully, if the community had not been willing to accept an outsider, if I had not been willing to work hard and learn quickly, any of these factors could have changed the outcome completely. But what actually happened was better than anything I could have imagined during those years when I believed that no one wanted me. The ranch became more than a home. It became a foundation for building the kind of life that creates ripple effects of positive change for generations to come. The scholarship fund will continue long after I am gone, helping young people who face the same challenges I once faced. The rescue operation will continue to provide hope and healing for animals and families throughout the region. The ranch will continue to be a center of community activity and support, contributing to the economic and social stability that makes rural life sustainable and rewarding. But beyond the specific programs and activities, the ranch represents something even more important. It represents the possibility of transformation, the power of love to overcome abandonment, the truth that family is something you create rather than something you are born into. Every young person who feels unwanted and forgotten needs to know that their story is not finished yet. Every person who has experienced rejection and abandonment needs to understand that those experiences do not define their worth or limit their potential. Every individual who feels like they do not belong anywhere needs to believe that the right community and the right opportunities are still possible. My story is not unique because I inherited a ranch. My story is unique because I learned to accept love and belonging after years of believing that such things were not available to me. The ranch was the vehicle for that transformation. But the real change happened in my heart and mind as I gradually understood that I was worthy of the investment that Ronald had made in my future. The baby my wife and I are expecting will grow up with advantages I never had, but they will also grow up understanding the responsibility that comes with those advantages. They will learn that privilege is not something to be taken for granted, but something to be used for the benefit of others. They will understand that family is not just about blood relationships, but about the commitment to love and support each other through all of life's challenges and celebrations. The cycle continues, but with the knowledge and resources and community support that can make all the difference. Our child will never doubt that they are wanted, never question whether they belong, never face the world alone without the foundation of love and sorority that every child deserves. But they will also understand that not every child has those advantages, and they will be raised to use their good fortune to help others who are still searching for their place in the world. The ranch will be their inheritance, but it will also be their responsibility to continue the work of creating opportunities and hope for people who need both. As I finish writing this story, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where I first read Ronald's letters, but the house is no longer quiet and empty. My wife is humming in the next room as she prepares for our baby's arrival, and outside I can hear Helen Rodriguez calling instructions to the new ranch hand we hired last month. The sounds of life and activity and purpose fill every corner of the space that once felt too big for one lonely teenager. The transformation is complete, but it is also ongoing. Every day brings new opportunities to build on what Ronald started, to honor the legacy he left while creating something new and meaningful for the future. Every day is a chance to prove that his faith in me was justified, that the investment he made in my future was worthwhile. The scared boy who sat in that group home office 5 years ago could never have imagined this life, but he would recognize the values that guide it: hard work, respect for others, gratitude for opportunities, and the determination to use whatever gifts you have been given to make the world a little better than you found it. These are the lessons that Ronald tried to teach through his letters, the principles that the community embodied in their welcome, the truths that I discovered through years of learning to belong somewhere. They are not complicated or sophisticated, but they are powerful enough to transform lives and create lasting change. The ranch will continue long after I am gone, but its real legacy is not the land or the buildings or even the rescue operation. Its real legacy is the proof that love can overcome abandonment, that family can be created through choice and commitment, that belonging is possible for everyone if they are willing to work for it and accept it when it is offered. If you are watching this and you have ever felt unwanted or forgotten, if you have ever believed that you do not belong anywhere, if you have ever wondered whether anyone would choose you if they had other options, then this story is for you. Not because you will inherit a ranch, but because you have the same potential for transformation and belonging that I discovered on that property. The specific circumstances of my story are unique, but the underlying truth is universal. We all need to belong somewhere, to be valued by someone, to contribute to something larger than ourselves. Those needs can be fulfilled in countless different ways, but they can only be fulfilled if we are willing to be vulnerable enough to accept love and belonging when they are offered. For me, that meant accepting Ronald's gift and working to deserve it. For you, it might mean something completely different. But the principle is the same. We have to be willing to believe that we are worthy of investment, that we have something valuable to contribute, that our stories are not finished yet. The ranch taught me that family is not about perfection or traditional relationships. It is about commitment and love and the willingness to invest in each other's futures. The community taught me that belonging is not something that happens automatically. It is something you earn through your actions and character and contributions to the common good. The rescue operation taught me that healing is possible for even the most damaged and abandoned creatures, but it requires patience and love and the belief that every life has value. The scholarship fund taught me that the best way to honor a gift is to pass it forward, to use your good fortune to create opportunities for others who are still searching for their place in the world. All of these lessons came together to create a life that is richer and more meaningful than anything I could have imagined during those years when I believed that no one wanted me. But the real transformation was not in my circumstances. It was in my understanding of my own worth and potential, in my willingness to accept love and belonging, in my commitment to using whatever gifts I have been given to make a positive difference in the world. That transformation is available to everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. It requires courage and hard work and the willingness to be vulnerable. But it is possible for anyone who is determined to create a better future for themselves and the people around them. The ranch will always be special to me because it was the place where I learned these lessons. But the lessons themselves can be learned anywhere by anyone who is willing to do the work. What matters is not the specific vehicle for transformation, but the commitment to growth and the belief that better things are possible. As I look toward the future, I see endless possibilities for continuing to build on what Ronald started. The ranch will continue to thrive and grow. The rescue operation will continue to help animals and families throughout the region. And the scholarship fund will continue to provide opportunities for young people who need them most. But beyond the specific programs and activities, I see the possibility of continuing to prove that love can overcome abandonment, that family can be created through choice and commitment, that belonging is available to everyone who is willing to work for it and accept it when it is offered. The baby who will be born in a few months will grow up with advantages I never had, but they will also grow up understanding the responsibility that comes with those advantages. They will learn that privilege is not something to be taken for granted, but something to be used for the benefit of others. They will understand that the ranch is not just their inheritance, but their opportunity to continue the work of creating hope and healing and belonging for people and animals who need all three. They will be raised to see themselves as part of a legacy that extends far beyond their own family, a legacy of love overcoming abandonment and commitment, creating lasting change. The story that began with a lonely old man searching for his grandson and a scared teenager believing that no one wanted him has become a story about the power of love to transform lives and create lasting positive change. It is a story that continues to unfold every day, with new chapters being written by every person who finds their place in the community, every animal who finds healing at the rescue, every young person who receives a scholarship to pursue their dreams. But most importantly, it is a story that proves that no one is ever truly unwanted, that belonging is always possible, that the right family and the right opportunities can appear when you least expect them and change everything about what you thought was possible for your future. The ranch that Ronald left me was more than property. It was a foundation for building the kind of life that creates ripple effects of positive change for generations to come. It was proof that one person's decision to love and invest in another person's future can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. That is the legacy I hope to leave for my own children and the children who will come after them. Not just a successful ranch or a thriving rescue operation or a scholarship fund that helps young people pursue their dreams, but the understanding that we all have the power to create belonging and hope for others. That we all have the responsibility to use whatever gifts we have been given to make the world a little better than we found it. The sun is setting now over the fields that have become my home, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that never fail to take my breath away. In a few hours, my wife and I will sit down to dinner at the kitchen table where I first read Ronald's letters, where I first began to understand that I was not alone in the world after all. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and new opportunities, new animals to help at the rescue, new decisions to make about the ranch, new ways to contribute to the community that has given me so much. But tonight I am simply grateful for the journey that brought me here, for the love that transformed my life, for the belonging that I once thought was impossible. The scared 17-year-old who walked out of that group home 5 years ago could never have imagined this life, but he would recognize the values that guide it: hard work, respect for others, gratitude for opportunities, and the determination to use whatever gifts you have been given to make the world a little better than you found it. These are the lessons that Ronald tried to teach through his letters, the principles that the community embodied in their welcome, the truths that I discovered through years of learning to belong somewhere. They are not complicated or sophisticated, but they are powerful enough to transform lives and create lasting change. If you have made it this far in my story, then you understand that this is not really about inheriting a ranch. This is about discovering that you are worthy of love and investment, that you have something valuable to contribute to the world, that belonging is possible even for people who have spent years believing that no one wants them. The specific details of your story will be different from mine, but the potential for transformation is the same. We all have the capacity to overcome our past, to build meaningful relationships, to create positive change in our communities. We all have the ability to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair, but we have to be willing to do the work. We have to be willing to accept help when it is offered, to be vulnerable enough to let others care about us, to believe that we are worthy of the investment that others want to make in our futures. We have to be willing to work hard, to learn constantly, to contribute to something larger than ourselves. Most importantly, we have to be willing to believe that our stories are not finished yet, that better things are possible, that the right opportunities and the right people can appear when we least expect them and change everything about what we thought was possible for our lives. The ranch will always be Ronald's legacy, but it has also become my own creation. The improvements I have made, the relationships I have built, the rescue operation I have established, all of these things reflect my own values and vision for the future. I am not just preserving what my grandfather left me. I am building on it, expanding it, making it something that reflects both his dreams and my own. When people ask me what I learned from this experience, I tell them that the most important lesson was not about ranching or business or even family. The most important lesson was about worth. I learned that I was worthy of love and investment and belonging, even though I had spent years believing the opposite. That lesson changed everything about how I saw myself and what I thought was possible for my future. It gave me the confidence to work hard, to take risks, to open myself to relationships and opportunities that I would have been too afraid to pursue before. It taught me that the limitations I had accepted about my life were not permanent facts, but temporary circumstances that could be changed through courage and determination. The ranch was the vehicle for that transformation, but the real change happened in my heart and mind as I gradually understood that I was not the unwanted, forgotten child I had always believed myself to be. I was someone worth searching for, worth investing in, worth loving unconditionally. That understanding is available to everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. It does not require inheriting property or finding long-lost relatives or receiving unexpected windfalls. It requires only the willingness to believe that you are worthy of love and belonging, and the commitment to work toward creating the life you want to live. The community that welcomed me, the mentors who taught me, the friends who supported me, all of these people chose to invest in my success because they saw potential in me that I had not yet learned to see in myself. But that potential was always there, waiting to be discovered and developed and shared with the world. Your potential is there too, waiting to be discovered and developed and shared. The specific form it takes will be unique to you, but the underlying truth is the same. You have something valuable to contribute to the world. You are worthy of love and investment and belonging. Your story is not finished yet. The ranch taught me these lessons, but you can learn them anywhere, in any circumstances, at any stage of your life. What matters is not where you start, but your willingness to believe that better things are possible and your commitment to doing whatever it takes to make those better things a reality. As I finish this story, I want you to know that if you are feeling unwanted or forgotten, if you are struggling to find your place in the world, if you are wondering whether anyone would choose you if they had other options, then you are not alone. There are people who will value what you have to offer, communities that will welcome your contributions, opportunities that will allow you to build the kind of life you want to live. But you have to be willing to look for them, to work for them, to accept them when they appear. You have to be willing to believe that you are worthy of the investment that others want to make in your future. You have to be willing to do the hard work of transformation, of growth, of becoming the person you were meant to be. The scared boy who sat in that group home office 5 years ago did not know any of this. He believed that he was unwanted and forgotten, that his story was already written, that better things were not possible for someone like him. But he was wrong about all of it. And if you are believing those same things about yourself, then you are wrong too. Your story is not finished yet. Better things are possible. You are worthy of love and belonging and investment in your future. The right opportunities and the right people are out there waiting for you to be ready to accept them and work to deserve them. I know this because I lived it, because I experienced the transformation from abandonment to belonging, from isolation to community, from survival to thriving. I know it because I see it happening every day at the rescue, with animals who arrive broken and afraid and gradually learn to trust again. I know it because I see it in the young people who receive scholarships from the fund I established, who use those opportunities to build meaningful lives and contribute to their communities. The potential for transformation is real, but it requires courage and hard work and the willingness to believe that you are worth the effort. It requires accepting help when it is offered, being vulnerable enough to let others care about you, and committing to use whatever gifts you receive to make a positive difference in the world. That is the legacy that Ronald left me, and it is the legacy I hope to leave for my children and the children who will come after them. Not just material wealth or property or even specific programs and activities, but the understanding that love can overcome abandonment, that family can be created through choice and commitment, that belonging is possible for everyone who is willing to work for it and accept it when it is offered. Where are you watching this from, and what part of this story resonated most with you? Have you ever felt like you did not belong anywhere? Have you ever experienced the kind of transformation that comes from finally finding your place in the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know if this story gave you hope for your own future. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding belonging. And remember that your story is not finished yet, that better things are possible, that you are worthy of love and investment and all the good things that life has to offer. The ranch will always be here, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create lasting positive change. But the real legacy is not the property or the programs or even the success stories. The real legacy is the proof that no one is ever truly unwanted, that belonging is always possible, that the right family and the right opportunities can appear when you least expect them and change everything about what you thought was possible for your future. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that transformation is possible. Thank you for being part of a community that values love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. Your presence here, your willingness to listen and learn and grow, is part of what makes belonging possible for all of us. The sun has set now over the fields that have become my home, but tomorrow will bring new opportunities to continue building on what Ronald started, to honor his legacy while creating something new and meaningful for the future. And that is exactly what I plan to do, one day at a time, one relationship at a time, one act of love and service at a time. Because that is what family does. That is what belonging means. That is what it looks like when love overcomes abandonment and creates something beautiful and lasting and true.